At Marvel Comics, readers have been waiting nearly a year to figure out what happened and what specific plot mechanic led to the dissolution of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's long running relationship over in the main Amazing Spider Man series. After teasing readers for nearly a year, Zeb Wells is about to embark on this recent storyline in The Amazing Spider Man, introducing the issue that caused Mary Jane to actually pursue a different relationship outside of Peter. My name is Ariko Braddock, and let's go ahead and check back in on The Amazing Spider-Man issue 22 to see how much closer we are to learning about what happened with Peter and Mary. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. And I want to introduce The Amazing Spider-Man 22 with Marvel's solicitation text for the issue. Who is this mysterious figure, and what do they have to do with Peter and Mary Jane's disappearances? So The Amazing Spider-Man 22 is written by Zeb Wells, featuring art from John Romita Jr., inks from Scott Hanna, colors from Marcio Menyz, and letters from VC's Joe Caramagna. The issue's cover is illustrated by John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Marcio Menyz. Here is a look at the cover for The Amazing Spider-Man 22, depicting the Mayan god Wayep, who is actually one of the key antagonists of the issue. I love the creative way that John Romita Jr. draws so many kind of like strands of hair over on Wayep's head, and think this is a really sort of like interesting and immersive cover that strikes a bit of a different tone than what we've seen on some previous Amazing Spider-Man issues. And big thanks to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview of the issue so quickly. Let's go ahead and kick this review off by talking a little bit about artist John Romita Jr. I really love what John Romita Jr. brought to this issue. I thought it was a little bit stronger than some of the work he submitted last time around in issue 21. I think this is because in this intro sequence, we're getting like kind of bigger and more blocky figures for Junior to depict throughout the issue. And I really like how we're kind of introduced to the supporting cast. I really like how Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr. have kind of committed to this new status quo for Norman Osborn, where he's still looking to kind of, reform his previous actions and turn into a hero. And it was interesting to sort of get a little bit of a tease over at Kamala Khan, who's involved in some of the science aspects over at Oscorp. I just think the way that Romita Jr. is able to kind of depict these characters with a little bit more precision, who are a little bit older than some of the characters he's working at last issue, made this title feel a little bit more cohesive. I would say there are moments like in the backgrounds where we could have used more detail. And also, I think that some of these characters are too large and don't have enough, details in their anatomy. But on the whole, this is still a much better, more visceral and kind of action-packed showcase for John Romita Jr.'s pencils. I think the issue really comes alive when we take a look at the sort of Mayan-influenced New York that is now kind of under ruin, in which Peter and Mary are trying to escape from. And all of just these sort of weird action sequences are drawn incredibly well from John Romita Jr. It kind of evoked older issues of The Amazing Spider-Man, like the ones he worked on with John Michael Straczynski. And I just think kind of this really sort of like attention to detail in motion is what made John Romita Jr. kind of a great artist in the first place. While there are sort of big blocky figures throughout this issue, I think pages like this are a great showcase to see just how kind of, versatile and how well Romita Jr., can draw movement in some instances. Now, as far as the writing goes in this issue, I think this one is a bit of a mixed bag. I know readers have been waiting a really long time to see sort of the conclusion of the ultimate kind of wedge that, dissolved Peter and Mary's relationship. And it's so frustrating that, we're being teased with this storyline for over a year, and it feels like we're just sort of making incremental progress to figuring out, essentially what caused it. This issue teases some interesting story beats and I think is plotted much stronger than the last installment. One of my favorite kind of aspects of this issue was how we were reintroduced to Paul, a character that Mary Jane is now in a relationship with. And I really enjoyed the way that Zeb Wells started to sort of foreshadow their relationship. As you know, at this point, you'd figure not even Peter Parker knows kind of the full extent of what's going to happen next. And also the way that Paul is also integrated into what Dr. Rabin is doing and has that sort of pre-established relationship with him, also I think made this issue a lot more complex and interesting to read here. I feel like some of the plot information is starting to sort of come around in this issue. It's just frustrating that a lot of these like teases just inch us ever so slightly forward with this status quo, and we don't have like a great idea at ultimately, kind of what caused this wedge between these two characters. Thankfully, this time around, I think the art from John Romita Jr. helps differentiate the issue a little more. Also, when we see that big kind of climactic fight between, Peter Parker and wayep, we also get a great look at how much more versatile Romita Jr.'s art can be. There's great sequences depicting really kind of fluid movement and kind of huge and bombastic fight sequences. It seems like John Romita Jr. is much better at depicting these action sequences in the issue as opposed to just kind of casual talking head showcases. Also, I really liked how how the last couple pages of the issue were paced, kind of leading Peter to a new setting. I think kind of the colors really helped dial up, that sense that Peter is now in a really kind of climactic installment of this arc, and that he's currently trying to figure out how to make his way back and sort of save the love of his life. I think colorist Marcio Menyz really kind of varied the tone here, as we got a lot of kind of yellows and dark reds early on in the issue, but then towards the end of the chapter, we're treated to some purples, whites, and blues. It absolutely looks kind of wonderful to behold over on the comic book page. That being said, I do think kind of from a writing standpoint and from an artistic standpoint, there are aspects to be desired from The Amazing Spider-Man 22. I certainly don't think this is one of Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr.'s best issues to date over on this series. So while I was really happy with some of the plotting over in The Amazing Spider-Man 22, I think I'd still like some more concrete answers on what exactly kind of caused the wedge between Peter and Mary. Also, I wish some of these elements of the storyline, were a little bit more kind of like robust and clear. It's taken a lot of research to figure out all the kind of directions that Zeb Wells has gone in this storyline. And I think some of these plot elements are so obscure that they're sort of kind of detracting from what readers are here for in the first place. To be honest, I am very excited for what comes next after this in the pages of The Amazing Spider-Man. I think kind of, the status quo elements of this story really hold it back from being something interesting without this additional pressure of trying to kind of shoehorn a status quo in along with all these other plot beats. I think it could lead to much better issues of The Amazing Spider-Man in the future. I want to know from you, what were some of your thoughts over on this issue? Did you enjoy The Amazing Spider-Man number 22? Well, thank you guys so much for coming to check out the video. We'll be back soon for more excellent comic book content. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.